Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Crownsman Show. I am your host, Jared Downey, and with me today is Gowdy Molina. How are you?
Good morning. I am very well, thank you.
Good, good. I know you were putting together a one of our long interviews yesterday. I think said you were to like 2 in the morning or something.
About 3,
Oh,
up at 4.
fun! That is dedication. But we have a guest today. We have Ken Gamroth. He is the president of Precision Bolting. Um, and let's just put it this way: these are not just regular nuts and bolts that you buy at the hardware store. These are one of them is, I think, I forget how. I'll get him to tell it. It's huge. It's in this huge box, like the size of a pallet. It's just amazing stuff. I'll let him dig into it. But before we do that, Gowdy, who I can't talk this morning. Who are our sponsors this morning?
All right, so today we have Power Zone Equipment. When you need a specialized team of world class engineers for your oil and gas pipelines, dewatering, or any fluid handling needs, you want to visit powerzone.com. In addition to their inventory of rebuilt pumps, motors, engines, they also have an amazing team to design and engineer your systems, no matter the challenge, no matter the location. Get in the zone with Power Zone. Visit them at powerzone.com. And next up, we have Savinaw Equipment. Savinaw Equipment supplies new and used mining equipment around the world, from placer to underground to ore processing plants. They have gold concentrating tables, trommels, and mineral jigs in stock now to take advantage of the high gold prices. You can visit them at savinawequipment.com, where you will find more equipment every day.
Thank you very much, Gowdy. Hello, Ken. Welcome to the Crownsman Show. How are you doing today?
Excellent, thank you.
Have you done a lot of these long form ones?
Nope, this is a first for me.
Well, we'll try to keep it exciting. I want to get something very clear off the bat, because there is going to be even when you and I first talked, I went bolting company. I used to do gutters, and we'd buy nuts and bolts, little in a little box. So I want to get that cleared off right up the way. Tell me who Precision Bolting is, and sort of the type of product that you're distributing and the scale that you operate at.
Yeah, most of our products are definitely not what you're going to find at your Home Depot or Canadian Tire on the shelf type. Um, so, Precision Bolting is the Western Canadian distributor of a group of products, the Nordlock group of products. Um, Superbolt mechanical tensioners, Nordlock wedge locking washers, Boltight hydraulics, expander pin systems. Is probably what we're best known for, but we also manufacture in-house a lot of our own products, and really work with the customers to uncover what their true needs are, because needs can vary in their definition for sure.
So I want to quickly jump into that Nordlock group, because that lineup of products, because and correct me on any information that I put out that's wrong right now, but for Nordlock, they've acquired a couple different bolting systems, right? So they've sort of have a suite of different types of bolts. Is that right?
That's correct.
So let's pick off a couple. Let's start with the Superbolt, because that's sort of, I mean, there's there's the world's largest one I saw a picture of, and it's sort of an interesting system. But they're still using a manual. Or they're using just regular equipment to tighten them and stuff like that. So can you just talk about the Superbolt first, and then we'll walk through a couple other products that Nordlock distributes.
Okay. Yeah, Superbolt is actually one of Precision Bolting's uh, best products or best moving products. A bulk of our business is based around Superbolt.
Mm.
Superbolt is a mechanical tensioning device. Um, so it's going to replace a standard hex nut or bolt, and it all you ever need doesn't matter about the size. All you ever need is hand tools, hand torque wrenches, air impacts, electric impacts, that type of thing. So the tooling that most people would have in their garage can tighten super bolts up to any size.
So what it's called a Super Bowl? What, like, I see that it's fit, and I forgive the layman questions, but I see that it's sort of fit into from my sight line, it's like a steel ring with a bolting system with bolts every couple inches depending on the size. So what is the so what differentiates it from another type of a bolt? Like what would be the old way of doing it, for example?
So if we just look at this is your standard Superbolt torque nut version. So rather than having a hex nut and having to torque that as most people would to create the load in the bolt, this assembly would go on just hand tight. And then all you need is small hand tools to tighten on these, what we call jacking bolts, because they're tapped into the body and they literally jack against the washer and pull the bolt.
Oh,
So it's all mechanical advantage, and most of your 90% of the torque that you would normally put into a bolt is wasted on simply getting the bolt moving.
right.
We eliminate all of that with these jacking bolts. So it's a simple mechanical advantage.
Where
That's the simplicity of the product.
I see. So where do they go on? Like what's a couple I mean, obviously there's a ton of stuff, but what are a couple of examples of where you're going to there that application is required or is it a better use?
Well, the reason for using Superbolt is extremely varied. For us, most of our starting point is we can generate extremely high bolt loads or clamp loads um, with simple hand tools. So achieving high bolt loads with conventional equipment can be very challenging. But because of the simplicity of it, we also get um, a lot of opportunities simply because of confined spaces. You know,
Mm,
if you've got a tensioner, say, on a piece of equipment that's in a corner, how do you get a big wrench in there to tighten a conventional nut? Well, with our Super Bolt, all you need is small tools. So we can get into very tight positions. It's also very safe. You know, the biggest tool that you may be using is, a half-inch wrench versus a large hydraulically powered high energy tool.
right.
So the reasons for using Superbolt are quite varied, but in general, it would be to achieve high clamp loads.
Yeah, it's one of these little things like you see it, it's obvious once you say it, but I didn't think of these small spaces and I've done it. I've been on like these old like even like these big pumps and stuff like that and you're trying to get in there and get a bolt and it's just like you know,
Yeah,
you having to like take one mechanism off to get to the next one and that sort of thing. That
yeah,
largest
exactly.
one, you send a picture and it's just, I mean, it's bigger than a pellet. I don't know how many inches diameter it is, but it's a giant bolting system. What would something like that? What's the application there?
That one I sent you was actually 57-inch diameter. It was actually metric version because it was used in Europe. But that goes on a large forging press, so it's holding massive components together. So the thread size, the diameter of the bolt, the threads were 57-inch diameter. So that's literally getting out here. So
Crazy. And so that sort of thing, that's a custom made bolt then, right? You're using there's obviously the bolts themselves, but you having to machine that entire unit together,
correct.
right?
Yeah, we have an entire line of catalog standards, but a large degree, 20-30% of what we do is still special design because somebody needs this load in this space and they're giving us the envelope that we need to hit. So we'll custom design and build.
Um, I I feel like we could actually go through and actually pick out a lot of different examples where the Superbolt is used, but I want to jump over just quickly to the Nordlock washer,
Mhm.
because that's another product. Is that a big part of your business too, distributing those?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So what's sort of the when I was going on the website, there's like different series of them. Could you just quickly walk us through sort of what the Nordlock washer is, but also just sort of the what differentiates one from the other?
Well, Nordlock washer in its essence is actually a pair of washers.
Hmm.
And they come together, and on the outer faces, there's serrations, and on the inner faces are cams. So Nordlock washer is known as wedge locking technology. So this would go underneath your standard hex nut or bolt head. And when you tighten the bolt, it's going to seat on these serrations. To loosen, the serrations will hold, and the movement has to be between the opposing cams, which wedges the cams are wedging action, and the bolt load would actually have to increase before it can come right loose.
Hmm.
So we call them vibration proof because vibration has no way of increasing the actual bolt load.
Is that something like the Nordlock washers? Is that standard? Like, I would think on, and we'll bring up some charts and stuff of pictures of where all the bolts are on like a rock truck, which is it's so neat to actually see it. That graph you sent, but um, are these standard now? Would anybody put something together without that's moving and like especially on like a mine site or something like that without having these types of washers?
Well, people do put a lot of equipment together without them, but
Really?
more and more manufacturers are switching to Nordlock because it makes a lot of the field issues go away. You
Mm,
know what people in industry, in a lot of these plant sites have just got used to the normal that, well, it comes loose and we just have to tighten it every week.
right.
But why? There is solutions out there. So it often takes a lot of years for those annoyances in the field to filter all the way back to a manufacturer.
Right.
That manufacturer honestly thinks his equipment is just the best
Mhm.
because he doesn't get all this information. So it does take years, and usually it's driven by a problem, that feeds back to a manufacturer. This is an issue. Well, then it's that manufacturer's responsibility to fix that issue.
Yep.
Nordlock is a huge way of fixing a lot of issues, and more manufacturers are switching to, providing it on new equipment.
And I was gonna ask you, Ken, like, so your customer base, of course, there's these major productions and things that are using your products. But what about just smaller, like for instance, myself, I've worked in equipment yards and stuff like that, and you're always tightening stuff up and that. Do you get those types of customers, these smaller, machine shops and places like that that have these moving parts that they're just doing a ton of maintenance, tightening these things,
Yeah,
and then they realize that your product actually just essentially eliminates that?
yeah, yeah. That's daily emails and calls. Like, hey, I have a whatever it is. This is coming loose. This is breaking. This is that. Those are daily calls for us. So, and that's the beauty of having the group of products is, and really what precision bolting is always about is, okay, well, let's take a step back. Let's look at what your actual problem is. To the customer, it's quite often, well, my bolt is breaking. Well, if we take a step back and often it starts with education. What is the bolting issue and why is it breaking? So if we can address the issues, we can eliminate the breakage or the loosening, whatever the problem is. So with the Nordlock group of products, we've got opportunity to solve an issue at multiple levels.
I'm just picturing myself being the person that phones you and like explaining my problem and it being completely not what the problem is.
Yeah, it's quite amazing where customers like, here's my problem, and we're saying, no, your problem's down there, and it shows up here.
I'm
So
laughing because I've been that customer
yeah.
for sure. Um, So let's move on to Boltight. That now again on your website, there's all these kind of these neat pictures, subsea and oil and gas, and so talk a little bit about the Boltight product line.
So Boltight is a hydraulic bolt tensioning system, and there's lots of subsea being one where they're very limited on the tooling that they can go subsea with and tension large bolts that are in some of these locations. So um, Boltight hydraulics, the flange would be set up with conventional hex nut and bolt, but the Boltight would attach to that and is the mode of creating the bolt tension.
Ah, right.
And they can hook a pile of them together, daisy chain them all together, and then engage the pump and tension all at once. yeah, there's lots of opportunity or lots of options with how we do it, but basically it's a hydraulic bolt tensioning equipment.
This is something I wanted to understand, Ken, is when let's see someone is they need this for subsea or oil and gas. Are they coming to you looking for a solution, or do they come with you with specs and say, "Hey, we need you to," or is it a mixture of both? How much
Mixture of
input are
both.
you getting into what actually goes into these operations?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of times we'll get a customer coming in with a set parameter of this is the bolt size, this is the footprint or the space that we have, diameter, height, this is the load that we need, this is how many there are, these are the restrictions, the special nuances of every application that we need to deal with. Um, and then we can look at all of that together and go, here's your best solution.
Mm,
You know, Boltight is a great product, but if you only have one bolt, it's quite an expensive system for one bolt application. So in that case, maybe Superbolt's better.
mm,
But if you've got a lot of nuts on a flange, well, then Superbolt with its jacking bolts may take longer than putting Boltight on. Superbolt and Boltight are both bolt tensioning systems. One's mechanical, one's hydraulic.
right.
So that's kind of where we're at is, with those products is what's going to work best for the customer.
Yeah, it's just to dig into that a little bit more. When you look at an engineer's drawings and a plan, sometimes it gets very precise. And I was just wondering, do you do you sometimes how often do they come with a plan and this is what we're doing, and then you have to say, well, no, this is actually better. Does that happen, or are you pretty well aligned most of the time?
It definitely happens quite regularly. The majority of the time, um, we're getting involved after the equipment's built.
Mm,
So, like I mentioned, manufacturers and their criteria. When you think from a manufacturer's perspective, they're trying to keep their costs down on building a piece of equipment so
right.
that they can be competitive in the market. So they're designing the machine, and bolting holds it all together. Um, but they're not bolting experts, and they quite often will assume that you can tighten a 3-inch bolt because it looks good on paper to them, but
Right.
in field application, the poor guy that's out in the bush in northern Alberta, well, how's he going to tighten this large bolt underneath the machine? So we end up dealing honestly more with modifying or retrofitting or equipping existing equipment.
I see. That's
But
in.
more and more as the products have developed and as the name, as we've grown, we are getting more and more involved with OEMs.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's very interesting. In this industry, I mean, you're in mining, oil and gas, subsea, all these. Again, I'm going through it. Power generation, wind. I mean,
Yeah,
there's all these. I, I think anybody you talked about the guy under the machine. I mean, there's a safety element to everything that you're doing. I mean, I was holding a piece of equipment on a mine site. I won't say who or for where I was, but it was the bolt then gave away, and that piece of it weighed about, I think, about 10 times what we thought it weighed. And when it dropped, fortunately, I wasn't too far under it. It would have completely crushed me, but it sprung my legs and my arms sort of like that, and I just kicked out. So fortunately, I was
yeah.
fine. But I mean, it flung me, I don't know, maybe 10 feet or so. Like it was a lot of impact. So there's a safety element to what you do, and how do I say it, without being too dramatic, but how much does that play into what you're advising your customers to do?
Well, that's a huge part of what we do. Safety has always got to be number one. Um, so, you know, back to Superbolt, is that's one of our uh, main movers. Let's say, as I mentioned, a person's only using small hand tools to
Mhm.
tighten. This is an inch and a half diameter bolt. we're going to put, in this case, 50 foot-pounds on these, which is a little 3/8 torque wrench.
Yeah.
That'd be equivalent to about 2,500 foot-pounds if you were doing a hex nut.
Right.
So you can see that ratio, 50 to 500. Well, 2,500, you're going to need a large, quite often they'll use hammer wrenches. If you were in the field, you probably saw guys beating on a wrench.
Yep.
How safe is that? That's just the reality. And I mentioned earlier that people in the field have got used to these industry realities.
Mhm.
That doesn't make it right. It
Right.
doesn't make it safe. It's just what we've had in the past versus what we have today.
Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of seems to me, again, it's a very layman perspective, but if you take one giant bolt and tighten it, that's one. If that one area goes wrong, the entire on that super bolt, and correct me if I'm wrong, if one for whatever reason, if one of those gave out, or there was there was something wrong with one of those bolts on the super bolt, the rest will hold it, right? Sort of like on a car, you wouldn't want two bolts holding on your tires.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
The other thing though it moves into is the stronger side. And there's sort of a thing that we talked about in the prep that's sort of safer, stronger, sooner. And I wanted to touch on that stronger side and going back to maybe to the Superbolt or some of these other, the subsea, the hydraulic systems and things like that. How much more strength can you get out of these system in compared to let's say a traditional one that they're using 40 years ago?
Well, it's an interesting question in that, keep in mind, most of what we do is retrofitting existing equipment. So, in general, if you've got a simple flange connection, you got two flanges with a stud and two nuts. We're only going to take off one of the nuts and put a super bolt on in its place. We're still
Right.
using the conventional hardware. It's just a simple way of tightening that conventional hardware. But in those applications where, maybe they are running the machine harder than it was ever designed for, that's pretty common in industry to push your machine to its limits, right?
Mhm.
And beyond. Um, so in those cases, we can make that existing hardware stronger, simply one by the mechanics of the Superbolt and what happens there, and two, just by the dynamics of how we tighten. Um, we back up just a little bit on that. If you're torquing a bolt, you're not only creating tension in the bolt, but you're creating a torsional force. With the super bolt, we're only going on hand tight and just pulling. So we have a straight torsional force with a straight tension force with no torsion.
Mm.
Um, because of that, we can pull about 15% higher on the exact same bolt
Mm.
because we're eliminating the torsion. So that's just a simple way of having the bolting stronger without having to change it.
Right. I was wondering things on like major projects, like construction projects, bridges and stuff. And every time just personality. I drive over whenever I drive over a bridge, and I'm not an engineer, so I'm looking at it and I'm looking at how the best I can of how they construct. And you see these giant bolting systems on these giant bridges, hundreds of feet above the water, and I'm sure it's safe. But there's always this thought in my mind, like, how do they know which bolts to use and which cables to use and all that? Has that changed the bolting system for, the new bridge in Vancouver instead of the one that they built, 60, 70 years ago? Are they using different bolting systems on that?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of the real old style bridges, that was all done with rivets and, hot forging rivets. You'd put it through the hole as a hot bolt and you'd beat the other end of it and mushroom it over, and now it's captive. That kind of system has been around for a long, long time. Um, the grades of bolts, the coatings that are applied, the current strength and quality of the steels we have now versus years ago. It's all improved. Something like a bridge, although there's been lots of applications for Boltight and Superbolt. That's more often something that we get into Nordlock with.
Mm,
The existing bolting is good enough. It's rated. It's a matter of keeping it tight. Therefore, the vibration proof or the wedge locking washers, because something like that would be subject to a lot of very dynamic loads. If you're a bridge and the wind's making your bridge move, what's that doing to the bolting that holds the whole bridge together? It's
right.
all feeling it, right? So that more often than not, that particular application would be something where we'd more likely be using Nordlock washers.
When you jumping ahead, Ken, a lot of these things are like you said, the that I think it's the biggest Super Bowl that's been made, and all these different applications. What about delivery? Because these aren't you can't just walk into your store and just start picking up bolts off the shelf. That's not. So are you? I mean, how many of your calls are, "We need these in 6 months," or, "We need these in 6 days"? Sort of what gap are you filling when it comes to that delivery and distribution? Because you're not just selling in Alberta, you're selling, you ship around the world, don't you?
We do ship around the world. Most of the stuff that I'm doing globally is more related to the kits that we put together, where we've got a lot of experience and knowledge in specific applications. But on the manufacturing side and delivery, uh, when you think of most of the big bolting, it's not something that people do deal with without some planning.
Right.
There's schedules to overhaul a big piece of equipment, and they're planning 6 months, a year, 2 years out ahead of the outage. So when we get into most of that big size stuff, it's planned far enough ahead that we can react and okay, we need for bolt tight, maybe we need 8 weeks for delivery. Well, that's not an issue because it's planned that far out.
Right.
That being said, a big part of what we do is rush delivery. We're currently working on a set of 8-inch super nuts right now that we have to build them and ship them inside 2 weeks from the purchase order. Well, that's quite an undertaking when you really look at the machining involved. Securing the material big enough and all the machining and the drilling and the tapping and the coatings, and yeah, we do a lot of very quick turnarounds.
What instigates a turnaround? Obviously, not that specific customer, but something like that. What instigates? Is it someone that they buy a load of equipment or something, some sort of plant is put into commission and it needs to be upgraded? Or like why would something
If something's being upgraded, normally those are the jobs that are scheduled out and we have time on. When we get into the rush stuff is, if you're thinking about, when we talked about those big ones, that was for a hydraulic press. So we may, the nuts that hold that press together normally aren't something that they address, but maybe they're the main hydraulic cylinder, maybe the main working of the press fails.
ah,
So they have to take it all apart. While we've got it apart, let's change this and then let's improve that.
right.
So that's where we get into the quick time turnarounds usually is, something else has happened that is dictating them to take the machine apart. While we've got it apart, let's make all these other improvements.
Hmm.
So tends to be more what causes rush jobs is something else has broke.
I see. You do these kits, Ken. I want to get into these because it's sort of a bit of a hallmark of your business. And I first off, let's do the setup. I want just give the audience a bit of an understanding of what these kits are.
Well, really, a kit can be anything. Um, when we define kits, we've got kits that are as simple as taking a variety of Nordlock washers that are needed for a specific application, putting them in a box, labeling it, as one part number, and out the door. Um, Other kits that we build are combining products or technologies. We'll, if we're selling Superbolts, we'll put conventional fasteners in with it, lubricant, tools, instructions, whatever's needed to best work with the customer. And that really, that's step one with kits, is defining what the true customer needs are.
Mm,
Tooling being a simple one. Okay, well, if we send out a kit of the equipment, how are they using it? A hydraulic tensioner without the pump and the hoses does you no good,
right.
right? So do you want us to sell it to you as a kit? But
This must be huge for remote locations, right? I mean, that
absolutely, yeah. That was really some of what, you know, our we've been doing that for a lot of years, like trying to help the customer through that and make it as easy for them to order as possible. But kits for us really took off years ago, for the front suspension on mining trucks.
ah,
Um, was what is one of our fast movers. That's one of the things that we send globally, um, where there's a variety of sizes. There was in this case there was mechanical issues where the conventional bolts that were supplied by the manufacturer were failing at an alarming rate.
mm,
The trucks were consistently down for what should be a simple application. The bolts were failing. So it started out as solving a mechanical problem, but to take a step back and be able to address, all the stakeholders in this piece of equipment, and in this case, we're talking about large mining trucks. So all the stakeholders, meaning the technicians that are doing the work, the maintenance supervisors who have to plan the work, um, the um, inventory people who have to order the parts,
mm,
the management which have to justify the costs. There's all these different steps, or all these different people involved in a solution. So by putting everything in a kit, we include the tooling and the instructions and everything that the technician's going to need. We put it all under one part number and we inventory it. So the maintenance super, when he's trying to plan out which jobs are going to happen, well, I want to work on that truck. The kit's available. Either they have it in stock or I have it in stock.
right.
Quick turnarounds, quick deliveries. By having it all under one part number, it's easy for inventory management. And then when we get into, we solve the problem, we've made it easy. We're working with the economics, so that the management of said equipment has an easy ROI justification to say, yeah, this is good value.
Mm. What I don't I wanted to clarify something though, Ken. If there's a like you sent me a chart of the of a rock truck and wow and a crane and these
A mining
uh,
shovel and
a mining
yeah.
shovel and these kind of kits. So like just in the rock truck, there's multiple manufacturers that make rock trucks. So is there do they have standard bolting on these rock trucks from unit to unit or from sorry, from brand to brand?
Oh
Or
no, they're all designed differently, if that's what you're asking. Yeah.
yeah, so are you and then they have different sizes. So
Mhm.
are you making a kit for each or how do you sort of put that together?
A lot of homework,
Ah, okay.
a lot of homework, a lot of working with the equipment, analyzing, you know, looking at drawings, looking at manufacturer torquing specs, and everything that the technician is currently working with. If it's conventional hardware that's supplied by the manufacturer, what's going to be our best ability to make a change with the least amount of impact to the customer, meaning the guys who are doing the planning and purchasing parts, and have the best success and the best economic viability.
Mm. So so these kits are they do you have like a schedule to them as well? Are they or are they ordered one at a time, or is there like an annual thing that they're going to replace this bolting system on the hydraulic system for the vehicle and stuff like that? Or is it just by piecemeal that when they need it, they call?
Both. As I mentioned, a lot of the work will be scheduled out ahead of time. So they'll look at their fleet of, maybe they have 40 trucks
Mm.
and they want to make this change or this improvement. And those trucks are all on maintenance schedules. They'll address the engine this week. And then in 2 weeks, when that truck is in for its next service, they'll address another regular maintenance issue. So most of the stuff is scheduled out, and it's a matter of aligning with those timelines and those schedules.
Right.
But then a lot of times things just break. So now we need it yesterday.
Right. The, um, and that sort of leads me to the next thing is, what a customer wants versus what sort of their choices are. We were talking about me, and I for sure, if I was an operator, I'd be the person calling, explaining my problem and it not being the actual problem. What when a customer is calling you, um, do they are generally are you are you giving them choices they didn't even know that they had?
Always. And I guess if there's anything that, has been frustrating for customers when they call us is that we ask questions. And quite often they don't have the answer to those questions. Like
Right.
we are honestly trying to give them the best solution, the best value, you know, uh, the best offering that we can. But they'll call and say, well, my bolt's breaking. I need a new bolt. Well, where's it breaking? What piece of equipment? Why is it breaking? How are you tightening it now? We start asking questions, honestly trying to help them. And you get a lot of deer in the headlights, like, I'll have to get back to you on that. I don't even know why it's broken.
Do you
So
do you think there's a certain amount of customers? I'm not asking you to talk poorly about your customers at all, but do you think there's a certain amount of is there like say 5-10% of people that just go, oh, I'm just gonna buy the one that just we had last time, just stick a new one on there.
constantly, constantly. Yeah.
And then they
Um,
phone you again in 3 weeks and go, okay,
yeah.
I think that I want
And,
to talk.
and then we'll say, are you ready to fix the problem now?
Right.
Because um, and it's quite entertaining. I mentioned earlier that a lot of times just educating the customer about bolting basics
Mhm.
is a solution in itself. Because honestly, bolting holds this entire world together, and it is so misunderstood. But in general, people have no clue what a bolt is actually doing. And the simplest definition would be, think of a bolt as a big spring. The tighter you tighten the bolt or the nut on that bolt, it's stretching that bolt. It's a big spring. And it's the strength of that bolt trying to hold itself back together as a
Mm,
tensile strength. That's what keeps the joint together. So when people, something as simple as, people will often say, well, my bolts are stretching. Well, good. That's what it's supposed to do. It's that stretching of a bolt that will allow it to hold the joint together.
so this when they say that though, they mean it when they originally say that though, they're saying it in a negative way. And what do they mean by it on the negative side? Is that it's not strong enough to actually keep that tension, and so it's stretching, and then
Yeah.
like when a bolt is loosening, I always assume that it's the nut that's moved somewhat. Is it actually sometimes that the bolt itself has stretched out?
Well, that can happen. Yes. There's a lot of other dynamics that go on. Maybe the mating faces of if it's a machine that's seeing a lot of dynamic or moving forces,
Mhm.
the faces can be moving against each other, and that fretting can cause distortion of the faces, which means material is disappearing, or
Right,
corrosion is a big factor. So if you haven't got those faces tight enough together, those components tight enough together, damage can happen there.
right.
The nut can come loose, the bolt can come loose. Yet we deal with a lot with variations in temperature.
Hmm.
So temperature is going to, like anything else, the hotter it is, it grows. So if when you're dealing with different types of material, stainless will thermally grow faster than carbon steel. So if you're not mating the right materials together, that can cause more issues. So it's we could go on and on and on about the mechanics of bolting, and that is what we try and help our customers through is take a step back. Okay, I understand right now that you've got a broken bolt. We'll get to that. Let's take a step back and understand what's going on so that we can not only fix your broken bolt, but fix your issue that led to the broken bolt.
Right. What about on the manufacturing side? You touched on it that you do that as well. Could you dig into that a little bit, Ken?
Yeah, I actually started back in the fall of '87 as an apprentice machinist in our manufacturing facility. So, that's how I really got into all of this. Um, Apprentice machinist, finished my ticket, grow up through the company. I was running the manufacturing side, and then got opportunity. And then this is going back, 30 some years ago, but got opportunity to at that time get involved with Superbolt, um, and really kind of pivoted off of that. And mostly what I do now is dealing with the bolting side. But yes, we do have a full machining facility as well.
Mm. With these kits that you put together, what sort of, just to go back to it, at what point in running the company did you say we need to actually be able to deliver these kits as opposed to essentially piecemealing it together every time and that sort of thing? So when did that become was that, did a specific thing happen? Did a customer need it and ask for it and then so it became part of your repertoire, or is it something that you pivoted towards seeing that there was an opportunity?
A little bit of both, really. I mean, uh, trying to make it as easy for the customer as possible. When you're providing only one part of a bolted joint, um, you have to realize that whoever you're dealing with, whether it's the technician, whether it's the planner, whether it's purchasing, we have to take them through the same steps. So it all started with, well, if you're buying a Superbolt, do you want me to supply the stud and the backup nut to go with it? Oh, that would be wonderful if you could do that, because that just makes it easy for us. Then we only issue one purchase order. That's really where it started. We built out on that with, okay, well, what trying to define what makes sense. Where's the best value for the customer? Sending lubricants makes sense. Sending, caps, or a lot of what we do now is with some of the truck kits that we do, um, or all the truck kits, and a lot of the mining shovels, and really the kits that we put together. We do very detailed instructions as well, because we've always been big about training, uh, as part of our service or our offering with the product. We would always go out and do training for the technicians as well, so they knew what they were dealing with. And we've had great success in kind of refining that. And every kit comes with a full set of instructions that are specific to the application
Mm.
that the kit is designed for. So when the technician's looking at the manual, he's seeing pictures of exactly what he's going to be working on on the equipment. So
Mhm.
when before he ever actually goes out to the equipment, he can read through and fully understand what he's going to be doing and what the purpose of it is.
There is something that you're sort of alluding to that I wish people that are r- running businesses for a long time, but also starting out like myself, that sort of that entrepreneurial road would really take to heart. And it's there's customer service is a wonderful thing. It really is. But it's really even more wonderful when you have the service, but you can also back it up. Like you said, there's actually a set of instructions there. Because you can be really nice to a customer as you're giving them a dog's breakfast, and what you're saying, what I'm hearing you saying is you've actually built something that, I mean, and I've talked to you enough to see that there's sort of a love for your customers and a need and a desire to provide good service, but it's backed up by
Mhm.
a deep set of competency that the customer is actually it's not about what they're buying from you, it's the value you're getting. And you've managed to build that very masterfully. And I just want to talk a little bit about your approach to that because it's in a way I wish we could put this in the beginning because it's such an important thing. So what is sort of your approach, not just on the customer service side, but also not on the feel good customer service side, but on the actual service side? How do you sort of approach that?
Well, number one, we take, the mindset that every tool is good as long as the person using it knows what they're doing with it.
Mm,
You know, and it comes down to that. If the tool is not, whatever the tool is, whatever the service really is, if the person who is engaged with that isn't getting the value, isn't seeing the value, isn't able to buy into it, they won't use it again.
mhm,
So, we really spend a lot of time with the customers trying to define what is it that you want? What is it that you're looking for? Where are we missing the mark? Like, we think we've got this super duper kit thing. Well, it doesn't quite work for you. What do I need to adjust or make work for you? So spending that time to, yes, educate is a big part of it. All of our equipment, it's only as good as the guy who's going to install it. And if he doesn't understand what he's doing, it's not going to get installed either correctly or they're not going to see the true benefits of it.
mhm. Do you enjoy it, Ken? And I don't. If you say no, and that's the honest answer, that's fine. But do you enjoy that continuous sort of that educational piece? Because I know, and I've seen it. I've seen people that are in your position, presidents, and they're running companies that are really good companies, but you see after a while the customer does they sort of get beaten down by the customer. It becomes almost just too much to bear. It's almost a look in some of their eyes. Do you enjoy it? Do you enjoy not just solving it, but the process of solving these problems?
Yeah, weird as it may seem sometimes. Yeah, I'm a bolting guy. I'm all in. I get a real kick out of taking the biggest challenge, and that's always been our our claim to fame is walk in and say, okay, what's your biggest problem?
Mhm.
I'll take it on. Well, we've got that problem, but nobody can solve it. That's the one I want. So
Right.
yeah, I get a charge out of that.
Do you think you could do the job you do without the background that you actually worked in the machining side? If you came in cold, like you take someone like me and put me in your position, is would it be how hard would it be if you took away all that knowledge of the machining, the bolting, like you actually understand it in an intricate way? How much does that add to the decisions that you're making from an operational standpoint and a growth standpoint for precision?
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. I'm a mechanical minded person. I'm a machinist by trade, but myself and my staff, we've got several engineers on my staff, plus the whole Nordlock global group, which is huge. We've got a ton of resources, but yeah, we are very mechanical minded people. So with what we're working on, most of our stuff is thinking about the mechanics of how it works. Me as a businessman and having a heart for training and teaching, I mean, you can ask my global peers when they send me an email saying, have we ever done a whatever? My emails tend to be pages with pictures and instructions, and here's everything you need, go. That's how I function. Is if anything you're bombarded with all the information I've got, I want to help you.
Do you Yeah, and I can see that it's a genuine thing, but it also from a return customer standpoint, being naturally that way must just be a huge, huge advantage to getting these customers, especially global that you might never meet them in person. So really what they know is what they at the end of the day, what they get from you. That's
Yeah.
how they know you. So So how much of it do you think that that plays? Is it that you have the Superbolt, you have that product, or how much of it is that you have the ability to deliver exactly what they need?
More to deliver what you need, and the Nordlock group of products is continually expanding too.
Right.
So right now I've got this group of resources. Next year I may have three or four additions to that. With that's a dynamic entity in itself. So our resources, our knowledge base is constantly growing. So we stay in touch with a lot of our customers. If we think of a lot of our applications truly are solving a problem. So some of our best customers from 5 years ago, we, we stay in touch with, but we solved their bolting problems.
Right.
Now they just call us the odd time for, well, I need some spare parts,
Mm.
or I need some service, or we're looking at something new. So our best customers 5 years ago aren't the ones that we, not no of no fault, but we've addressed all of their concerns that we can with our products. But we're constantly growing and adding. So I can call a customer back and say, that job that we did 5 years ago, we've actually got an upgrade or something new that would make that even better than we did it then.
It's I just to wrap up a couple quick questions. What are your main industries, Ken? If you had to break them into the top 3 to 5, I mean, where are most of your products going?
Number one for us in the last few years has been the mining and processing. Here in Western Canada, we've got coal mines. A big chunk of our business and the kit development really was addressed out of the oil sands projects in Fort McMurray, where there's a large fleet of trucks and shovels and drag lines and conveyors and pumps, and that's our bread and butter work. So that whole conglomerate of mining products or processes is our number one. But we do a ton in oil and gas, things that straightforward flanges and heat exchangers and pressure vessels of all different types. Um, we do quite a bit in the power industry, primarily in the thermal with steam or gas turbines, the bolting required for those. Um, Power industry also on the hydro side. So hydropower dams are known to have very large bolts holding the shafts together, and the impeller that is transmitting the power to the generator. Very large bolting there.
If you were to, so anybody watching from those industries, Ken, if you're, as we wrap up this interview, if there is something that customers are going to get from, if they pick up the phone today, or they see this interview a year from now. I mean, we get people watching the shows. I mean, sometimes 2 years later, they're watching this content. If they phone today or they're phoning 2 years from now, what is something that you can guarantee that they'll get when they pick up that phone and talk to you?
Well, right now it doesn't matter where the world they are. We can either address them directly here or with the Nordlock group, which is global. Um, we have resources everywhere, so we can get them the right people, the right product, the right technology, is in very quick time, and that's not going to change. We're only getting stronger. We're only getting bigger. More boots on the ground. Let's say.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's and honestly, Ken, it was a bit of a tough interview to go through these bolts, because it's exactly the type of interview that I always have a challenge with. It's the ones where there's a product that everybody knows, and yet it's like we did one with the Cal Tire interview, very similar, where it's like, oh, it's tires, it's rubbers and round.
Sounds
Yeah.
simple.
Sounds simple. And then I start reading through it and I go, "Oh no, I don't know anything about this."
Yeah.
So thanks for, and I hope I was able to ask a few questions that allowed you to sort of display what you do, because that really was my goal. Because from a technical standpoint, there is so much. I mean, we could take one of those mining shovels and unpack the bolting system that goes into it. I mean, you could just go on and on. So I hope I gave precision bolting and you and your team some justice in coming on the show and explaining what you're doing.
Oh, I really appreciate it. Back to what I had said earlier, I mean, we're all about, if nothing else, training and talking to people about this. It's weird, but we love bolts and we love to explain and teach and train and explain to people what bolts are doing.
Well, if you ever have an extra one laying around, we'd love to put one up on display. One of these cool ones that you have on display in our studios. It'd be great to have it. So thank you, Ken, for coming on the show, and we hope to get. We're technically filming this in December, but it'll be released in 2021. So hopefully that's a little bit more of a normal year, and then hopefully you come back on the show at some point. It'd be great to have you.
Love to, love to.
Thank you. Okay, Gowdy. Gowdy is saying, "Wait 1 second." So what I'm going to have to do is now fill in this time with talking.
I'm back. I'm back.
And Gowdy is back.
That's what happens when you're one.
I was getting ready.
Monitoring.
I was thinking like, what could I
We're-
pause?
this is why I'm not part of the interview.
technical things. Gowdy, that was yeah, like I said, that was one of those interviews. I was starting, the more I researched, the more I was like, oh no, I don't understand so many things here.
Ooh, what am I doing here?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm really glad Ken came on. Like I said to him, I hope we did some justice to them, and at very least the audience has an understanding of what they're doing and sort of their approach doing it, because I found that quite interesting.
Yeah.
Gowdy, where can people follow, like, share, comment, give feedback, suggest the next guest, and so on?
Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We've got an episode, actually, like 2 episodes a week, sometimes more. So definitely please subscribe. You can also follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn at Crownsman P. If you'd like to be part of the show, whether it's the Crownsman Show, Mining Now, or Crownsman Energy, you can contact us info@crownsman.com. You can also listen to the podcast pretty much everywhere: Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, I think, or Apple Play. I'm not sure which one it is, but yeah, pretty much everywhere. Yeah.
We do not have the Spotify deal that Mr. Rogan had yet. We're working on it.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. I don't know if we'll get there. I don't know.
Hey, think positive.
You went to another level. Okay, thank you, Ken, for coming on. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We're so glad that you're enjoying these shows, and keep coming back for more. I think in October, November, we had like 96,000 people just
Mhm.
watching our YouTube channel, which was we were excited when 30,000 were watching back
Wow.
in, at the same time last year. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for all your support, everybody. We love doing these shows, and we will see you on the next episode of The Groundsman Show.